Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Thriving Minds podcast with your host, Walter Parada, where we strive to provide you with empowering talks so you can live to thrive. I hope you find yourself in the right frame of mind, focusing on all the things within your control. All right, so today's episode, we'll be talking about finding that right fit in life. As we go through life, many of us have a vision of how our lives will play out or hope to happen, or at least have an idea of where we want to be. Our imagination can lead us to so many different possibilities that the future can excite us. If things start to happen as we imagine it, that optimism continues. But if life doesn't play out as we expect it to, it obviously is disappointing that can leave us feeling dejected and possibly pessimistic. Either way, momentum is built that naturally dictates our focus. We have many choices in life that we make that are based on compromises, and this helps to lessen the blow of being severely disappointed. Our first instinct is to preserve what we have, whether it's our confidence, food, a home, the money that we make, the people that we love and care for. If there's a chance of losing it, then this is where compromising makes more sense. This can cause us to become frustrated that we had to make a certain decision just to maintain what we have. If you happen to experience feeling down for life not materializing how you expected it, know that you can work to change things. There's always time to make changes, and it's just recognizing when to pivot and how to do it. The best time to do so is now, to make changes, and they can be small to make a big impact for the better. Just because you started down a certain path and are dissatisfied with it is not an obligation to continue with it. Obviously, there's risk associated with change. You grow accustomed to things, to routines, and disrupting that makes it uncomfortable. We're creatures of habit, and it can be hard to change certain habits. When I was in high school, imagining how my life would play out, there were so many different possibilities, but the common theme in those different scenarios that I envisioned was I wanted to enjoy what I did and be with the right people. I was open to so many different career possibilities and eventually settled on pursuing a career in agriculture. What I envisioned was having a balance between working outside and inside. But I wanted to have my own farm. I wanted to run things my way. But the more I started to learn about it, the more I realized, man, you need a lot of capital, you need money, you need good credit to at least start off. So I decided that, hey, maybe I'll work for somebody else in the meantime. In college, it prepared me for looking at the big picture, having that right and accurate information to make good decisions and to produce a successful crop. I started my working career in Hawaii, moving from Florida, and I was ready to gain experience. And I remember in the interview process, it was an enjoyable one where it was more conversational that made me at ease. And one of the questions they asked was, how do I envision my career? And I told them working in the field alongside farmers, providing assistance in their operations. One of the interviewers said there's definitely opportunity for that at this company. And that got me excited. I wanted the opportunity to get the work there. But I knew this was only a temporary solution. I still had the vision of having my own land and running things how I wanted to. So they offered me the job and I took it. But the role was in manufacturing, focus on warehouse management and some field experience. So we were growing corn and it was a lot of just so many different varieties of corn that needed to be separated and shipped out. At first, I was okay with it, and I understood that I needed to gain experience in this opportunity that I was afforded. I was excited the first few weeks, just learning different things, but then I eventually had a meeting with the site manager, and he asked me what role I wanted in the company. I told him I wanted one where I'm out in the field and helping farmers. And he responded by saying, there aren't many roles like that within this company. So clearly, I got mixed messages from what I was told in the interview and what he told me. I was soured by this and I knew that it was best for me to move on, but I stayed. I stayed because I had good income coming in and that enticed me to stay. Culturally, I was a bad fit, and that's something I remember telling the interviewers in the process. I said, I want to work at a place where I feel like I belong. The people that I work with, I did not enjoy being around at all. It was a bit of that tough persona, putting up a front, where there was just a sink or swim mentality. Let's see how you do without a paddle. It was just very little help. But what was ironic was the company promoted personal development. I'm sure it was with the intent of bettering people, but with the benefit of increasing overall revenue, and they focus on specific measurable goals. What seemed to be missed in the culture was a genuine sense of caring for individuals and actually developing talent. There was the annual performance reviews, and maybe they thought that was enough. My reviews were poor. It was all the things that I wasn't doing well, thinking that was enough to develop me. I would ask specific situations and recommendations on how to improve, but it was just generic responses that were vague. It was just a phony way to say they support people. I felt frustrated, alone. People I had to talk to could not relate, and just a lack of understanding. There came a moment of revelation at the end of my time there when there was a young site manager. He came in to take over for the next 10 years or so. From the start, he showed a real sense of caring for people. He'd come by the office and talk. He'd say, hey, let's go out to lunch, let's go to the field, and just want to pick my brain. He would include me in on meetings, and I felt really valued for the first time. Prior to him coming, I was checked out, but he got me interested, and my final performance review was actually a great one. I didn't even care at that point, but I realized the people that you surround yourself with have a big impact on how well one performs. I remember thinking it would have been great if this guy was there from the start, and I think I would have enjoyed it. He brought out the good things about me, he played to my strengths. In one meeting we had, there was a focus on coming down on leadership running many of the manufacturing sites, as there was a high turnover rate amongst new hires. I remember the person leading the call starts off with a question, and she asks, what is the number one thing that is hurting us? And the young site manager, he says, attrition. At that time, I didn't know what it meant, but they explained it. I was surprised by what I was hearing because I thought I was the bad apple. I thought I had a bad attitude about how I was treated there. But the person leading the call was the head of talent development. And she told the story of a highly regarded colleague that was hired from another company. But she struggled to fit in and give her best as she seemed to have gone through what I was going through. Things like suppressing who she was and giving her feedback of how she needs to conduct herself. This really affected her confidence, and eventually she left the company. And this meeting was to call out the lack of effective leadership and find the resolution going forward. It probably disrupted the ego of many of the older white males running these different sites, as they had that old school mentality of show your worth through being tough, making it on your own. The site manager at the location I was at definitely handled things that way. He was almost checked out when I arrived, as he was 3 years away from retirement, and others told me he had no interest in taking on young talent, as he mostly wanted to do his own thing. His actions spoke volumes to me, and I basically had no respect for him. At one point, he even had a meeting with many of us to let us know that the company is focused on developing people personally and that he was against it. So clearly, he let his intentions be known that he wanted to be left alone. The young guy was much different from that current site manager when I first arrived. I had a poor relationship with him, almost animosity, as he came off just disinterested in my development, but quick to point out my faults. I remember he picked me up from the airport when I first arrived in Hawaii, and he gave off a feeling of being disingenuous. On the car ride to the hotel, I tried making conversation and asked him if he liked sports, and he said no with a dry response, and the conversation went nowhere after that. He was a man of very few words. It was just yes, no, and just enough information to get somebody to shut up. I remember I arrived on a Thursday around 8 in the evening. We got to the hotel by 8:30. When he dropped me off, I asked, when should I come into work? Just to be courteous, to show him that I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And he says to me, show up tomorrow at 7 a.m. My kind of can do attitude was, okay, I'm ready to prove myself. But my intuition made me stop and say to myself, are you serious? I just came from Florida, 5,000 miles away on an 11-hour plane ride, and you want me to come in the next day? The better side of me was thinking, be considerate and let me come in on Monday so I can settle in. But no, I showed up Friday at 7 and stayed the whole working day, just bombarded with a bunch of information. I should have known that it wasn't going to work out at this point. All these little things were worth noticing, which I did not act on. That's when I started to silence or ignore the signs of something is wrong. That's why it's important to trust yourself. What you're experiencing is unique to you. So not everybody's going to understand. Do what works for you. The company paid for my things and the car to be shipped out from Florida to Hawaii. And under the agreement that I signed with them, if I left within a year, I would have to repay them back for it. So my goal was to be there at least a year. I did take the job seriously, but I wasn't passionate about it. I didn't look forward to it, and each time I was there, I would constantly have my fist closed, almost white knuckle, ready to fight. The highlight of my day was when I left that place. I guess I got used to it, and once I made it a year, I convinced myself it's not so bad here. And this was just slowly chipping away at me, becoming more like this beaten down version of myself. I stayed 3 years and a half, but was looking for different opportunities within the companies throughout. I didn't get any job offers within the company as I had a bad performance review, so no one would vouch for me. And this company was very much getting job offers based on other people's recommendations. What was interesting was the young guy that was supposed to take over for the retiring site manager, he left the company within the year I left. Others were surprised, and I kind of thought, that makes sense. I wasn't alone in this. He must have saw or felt what I experienced, and he just had the sense to move on quickly. Eventually, I got tired of it and found a different opportunity. It was aligning with what I wanted to be out in the field, but be back in the office to plan out and figure out solutions to the problems that we were facing. So I ended up getting a job in a nut orchard. And when I first toured the farm, initially I thought, damn, how poorly managed the orchard was. It was just trees dying, bad field conditions, old equipment, and the people were in survival mode. But it was a step in the right direction. I knew it was just temporary, and I used it as a stepping stone. I did learn valuable things and grew both professionally and personally. But I could tell that it was just going to be a short term stop. At this point, I knew I wanted to do my own thing and wanted to have my own ranch raising bucking bulls for rodeos. But after that, I ended up getting a job managing a farm program for a youth correctional facility, which involved overseeing a little over 100 head of cattle. I thought I was going to have the freedom to run things how I felt was good for the youth so they can learn different aspects of agriculture. But once I got there, it was a complete joke. The people in charge were only there for a check. I realized at the many different stops, they all had something in common, and it was poor leadership. And that set the tone for mediocrity. If people in charge ran things in such a dysfunctional way, then I knew for sure I could run my business successfully. To provide people with a resource to develop themselves. All these places where I offered my services got people hooked on fear, eroding what people wanted to do with their lives so they can get a steady stream of income to get by another day, to be afraid of taking chances, just producing more mediocrity. All of this served me well because it reinforced the belief in myself, to put my best effort in something that's worthy, and eventually I found my purpose. At the time I was going through this, I was frustrated, I was pissed off, I was annoyed by anything related to where I offered my services or the working place. But the more I took a step back to see the bigger picture, the more I realized I can execute what I envision for my life. It's going to be hard, but it's better than the alternative of just dwindling away at some job that took my enthusiasm for life away. This whole time, I was developing grit, which was benefiting me now, but it was uncomfortable. The first move got me acclimated to moving on to different things. It was less scary. It also made things exciting, as I have a tendency to get bored with the same old thing. These are things I learned about myself later on. It made me more confident in who I am and the decisions that I make. Wrong or bad decisions were okay. I knew I was going to make them. I just need to overcome them. I understood it was a learning process. But even in school, there was an indication that I would move on to different things. I had a hard time fitting in, which served me well. I was not too attached, trying to appease others, and it allowed me to just focus on myself. Yeah, it was lonely, but it allowed me to be efficient with my time. The friends that I had, I still have them today. And when you do find what benefits you, hold on to it. It keeps you in that mode of, is this something I want in my life? To add value by eliminating what's unnecessary. In some ways, back then I had a fixed mindset, focus on my limitations, but at other times or situations, I had a growth mindset. I'm not sure why it went back and forth, and probably we all experienced this to a point. Maybe it was certain periods where I felt empowered, and other times I felt overwhelmed. Certain things I feel like I could have got better at, and other things it just seemed too difficult. But for sure, I know I'm more focused on what I can do, what I can improve on, instead of focusing what I'm not. Silently, I knew that not fitting in was good for me. And I realized that allowed me to move on from situations that were not what I envisioned or what I wanted. At the time when I was going through all of this, finding my way at work, it made me feel inferior, that I had many faults that I needed to correct. The younger version of me was more confident, full of energy, but in more time working for somebody else, it made me doubt myself more, made me play into being dictated by fear. It made me think, what else am I going to do to earn a living? I have it good here. All of this taught me that if I don't have a place where I fit in, then I need to create one that suits me. Even though venturing off on my own has its own unique obstacles, like having unsteady income, no income at times, less available resources, but it allows me to work on my terms, and this provides me with a tremendous peace of mind. If a working environment is unwilling to accept you for who you are, then it's most likely the wrong fit. Money or other compensation may mask you wanting to move on, but that's just going to delay the great possibilities that lie ahead. Yes, there's risk in trying something new, It may not work out, but if you can use it as a lesson in your journey in life, it can do you good. The first job out of college, I left in disdain, feeling like a waste of time. That's something I'm unable to get back, and it took a while to recover from it. The initial fear of I went to school for this profession made me limit myself, made me see things in a narrow scope. I thought I needed a certain formal education if I want to try something new. But the more that I explored what options I had, the more I realized that opportunity was all around me. I just need to be dedicated to what I was going to pursue, that I can learn and figure things out along the way. It provides a great sense of liberation and empowerment because I was the one taking the initiative. It got me to break away from authority or hierarchy and just do what's in the best interest for me. I can get away from asking permission on how exactly to do things. The mistakes that I make going forward are just stepping stones and not weights pulling me down. When I left the first job, I remember I let the safety lead of the site know that, hey, I'm leaving the company. And she says, yeah, she could tell it was time for me to move on. She said that when I first arrived, I was full of energy and confidence. And then at the end of my time there, I was just dejected and just going through the motions. So she tells me, good for you. But now I can move forward knowing that hardships are expected. And it's important that I gain something out of it because if not, it brings out the petty parts of me. At the time I was going through all of this, I wanted to wallow in anger and say this isn't fair, but I had to move on. I had many periods of coming to work pissed off. I didn't come to work to make friends with anybody. I was almost icy to everybody. I came in to do my job and get out. Work relationships were not a priority, and it's something I really avoided. Eventually, I would aim to do things with a resolute professionalism, avoiding small talk, all about business, and just moving on to the next thing. So at least I gained that out of it. With each move, even though I stayed in agriculture, I moved into different aspects that prepared me for something new without being completely unfamiliar. Know that you can pivot to something new. Yes, you may have spent years going to school for a certain profession or spent years working in a particular field or even for the same company. It will feel scary of what it is you're giving up to venture off into something new, and it carries many uncertainties and risk. It means giving up a position that you worked yourself into that comes with hierarchy or prestige. That is a short term fear and is part of the weaning off process to become resilient, stronger, and more independent. Just think of certain new changes that you've been through before, like going to a new school with people you're unfamiliar with, moving to another part of the country, starting your first job or career. You've already experienced some of that uncomfortable and uncertainty that makes things isolating. And the more that you experience not fitting in, the better it can be for you longer term because it acclimates you to that unsettling feeling. It keeps you on alert, looking for ways to figure things out, making you more adaptable. Old habits are very difficult to get away from because time has cemented it. So, to combat that, make sure to do different things, think in different ways, and just be open to the changes and what comes with it because it makes things less fearful. It mentally prepares you to move on to things on your terms, which can make the transition a lot smoother. When you're forced or feels like you're forced to do something, a sense of desperation is triggered that makes clinging on to what you know as the only option, an all or nothing scenario. Frustration and loneliness will be experienced, but have a support system where you can lean on people to help you work through the different periods you're transitioning to and from. During my work in transition, I felt mostly alone, but I had different people at different times to help me out. Just talking to them got me to organize my thoughts on what I was going to do next. And their feedback helped me work through certain things I didn't consider previously. Simply me just keeping it in my head would have been a real detriment. So I'm thankful for the people that were there for me. The one thing that I continuously came away from each of these experiences was, why did I wait so long to move on? But the answer was obvious. I was fearful of the certainty that I was going to give up, but that just fueled anger towards me for waiting so long. The longer I stayed at a place that I disliked, the more time I needed to recover from it. So if you're not happy with how your life is unfolding, do something different to change it and start off small. Do it on your terms and you'll be much happier with yourself and more confident. Build momentum in the positive direction and keep working towards it. It's going to be enticing to take the path of least resistance, but that's just following the crowd to fit in, and instead work to find your right fit. It may take a while with many different stops, and the thoughts will arise of, is what I'm doing right? Is this what I want? This leads to continuously trying new things to find what works. If you're wrong, know that is only temporary and just use it as a stepping stone to get you closer to the place you need to be. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're interested in more topics like this, become a Thriving Minds member at www.thrivingminds.live. It's your personal development resource so you can build that right mindset so you can live to thrive. All right, until next time.